Hello, this is Ricky Pound back again to talk about two more pieces of Meissen porcelain from the 18th century. The first piece I will be talking about is a piece I own. It is a Meissen plate around 17 centimetres long, about 1730. And the second piece is a Meissen cream pot or jug. Dates again to about 1730, and they're both pieces that I believe that originally were together, and my research has led me to this conclusion, and the reasons why will be discussed in the upcoming slides. So let's get on with it. Now, in Bonham's Important Meissen Porcelain from a European Private Collection, this is the third part, an auction that took place on the 22nd of July 2020, I succeeded in acquiring this very handsome plate that you can see in front of you. And I actually can show you the catalogue. There's the catalogue it came from, and the very page that it was catalogued under. There you go. And as you can see, the plate is finely painted with Cafferati harbour scenes featuring ships, merchants and sailors. And here we have details of the central cartouche, a close-up of the sailors and the merchants. And if you look very closely, you can see they're very finely dressed. The two figures in the left, for example, are Oriental in appearance. They've got long moustaches, long black hats. The one on the left is in a very fine yellow outfit. The one to the right in a purple outfit with either painted flowers or embroidered flowers. You've got the ships coming into port with all the goods, and the goods can be seen on the right, where you've got more Oriental gentlemen as well. Now, I just wanted to point out this particular distinctive feature from the cartouche. Now, behind the gentleman to the left, you can see two palm trees, one of which has got its fronds, the other one is completely devoid of vegetation. Now, the reason this is important is that it also appears on the cream jug as a distinctive motif, and perhaps showing that it's the same artist that you'll see in just a minute. Now, as we scroll up to the top of the painting, the very summit of this cartouche is this lovely puce pedestal, which contains two Oriental gentlemen. The one on the left seems to be stood at a table. The one on the right is carrying a tray, no doubt, with tea bowls or a teapot, etc. And then you've got these lovely swirls to the left and the right in puce itself, and they're very much stood on this cartouche, this gilded cartouche with vodka luster. And then right at the centre, you've got this lovely spray of orange or reds as well, which continues around the perimeter of the plate. As you can see, we've now travelled to the base of the cartouche, and we can see another Oriental gentleman in puce once again, surrounded by these lovely wisps of red feathers. Now, the gilding itself is quite elaborate, this elaborate strapwork gilding that extends around the perimeter of the plate, making it, I think, particularly lavish and very expensive. And as we zoom back out once again, you can see the plate in its entirety and how it works. You've got that lovely gilding, as I mentioned, around the outside. Then you've got the cartouche in the middle with the vodka luster. You've got the puce figures stood on the pedestals. You've got the purple and you've got the red feathers complementing the gilding around that quatrefoil cartouche. And then in the centre, these very elaborate scenes of ships, of harbours, and of course Oriental gentlemen and traders trying to purchase wares, porcelain, cocoa, etc. Now let us turn very briefly to the base of the plate as well, which gives us more information. You can see right in the centre there you have the almost straight cross swords of Meissen, which were introduced in around 1723, but not necessarily applied straight away. And then you've got the Gilder's number 5 as well, which you can see beneath the cross swords. Now, it was up to the Gilder to provide that number, and he tended to use it on everything he worked on within the company. Taking a closer look at the perimeter of the plate, you can see these lovely sprays of flowers, very much based, I think, these ones on kakemon flowers, so Japanese flowers. And of course, the kakemon as a decorative style was incredibly influential and popular with Meissen in the early years, and it was often combined with chinoiserie subjects as well. And again, zooming in, we can see a much closer representation of the cross swords here. The early cross swords tended to be straight, and they would have these engorged or large pommels on the bases. And that is something, again, you would see really in the 19th century from the 1850s onwards. But at this particular time, you almost certainly saw them in conjunction to the straight swords. And as again, you can see here the number 5, which was the numeral used by this particular gilder when he was gilding the plate. And in fact, he would have done this across the whole of the surface that he was employed to gild. So I think we really come to the crux of the situation here, the crux of my argument and my research. When I was online, I come across this image from a cream jug at a exhibition at the National Trust property at Poleston Lacey, and I was kind of taken aback by the similarities of the decoration on my plate and on their jug. So the first thing I did is I went online and I had a look at the exhibition and any information that I could get about this particular object. Now, there was an exhibition at the time called Treasured Possessions, Riches of Poleston Lacey, and it really marked 80 years since Dame Margaret Grenville left Poleston Lacey and her collection to the National Trust. And 100 treasures were being shown, including imperial china, Staffordshire figures, and of course 18th century uh, Meissen. So I was really intrigued by these two objects together, and after viewing more photographs online and using their database as well, it quickly became apparent to me that these two objects belonged together, but I of course needed more evidence. And the first bit of evidence was the dating. They were both dated around 1730. Secondly, both ceramics had the same gilder's number 5 applied to their bases. Now, a Meissen gilder tended to use the same letter or numeral across his career on everything he did. So we could not necessarily say that these two pieces belong together just on the basis of the gilder's number. What we could certainly say at this particular point is that both were had gilding applied by this particular gilder. Now, next I established that the gild pattern was identical to both saucer and jug, and this really was the clincher in many ways, because the gilding is like a thumbprint, it's individual, and the gilder on each service would come up with a unique gilding pattern, and the gilding pattern on both the cream jug and the plate were exactly the same. So what we could say with definite certainty now is that the jug and the plate were made at the same time and were made together. Now, what I suspect happened here, they were an addition to a traditional service. So you could get many different types of ceramic as an addition to your service. So your service could be tea bowls, cups and saucers, etc., milk jugs, but you could extend it so you could have full services of tureens, hot chocolate cups, etc. And these were quite private, individualistic objects in terms that they were objects, for instance, the broth bowl or a cream bowl that you could use in private as well as in public. So really, as the gilding pattern matched uh, on both on the 17 centimetre stand, they were made specifically for each other in many respects, indicating that originally the Grenville Meissen jug would have stood on this very stand. Now, I just want to return to the theme here. We've already established that we have the common theme of cafferati or harbours to both the plate and the cream jug. Now, looking at the artwork, they appear to have been painted by the same person. And I think one piece of evidence that goes towards this is the existence of the palm trees that we see in both compositions. If we look to the left, for instance, we have the gentleman in oriental attire, and then just above them, we've got this palm tree with a few fronds on the top, and we've got this bare one to the left. And if we have a look at the cream jug, we can see either one or two palm trees with leaves on, and then to the right again we have this kind of common feature of a palm tree which has been cut down. It's certainly without its leaves, etc. Now, at the time, it was for Meissen artists just not allowed to sign your work. You just weren't allowed to get away with anything. So what certain Meissen artists tended to do was either hide their initials within the composition of the painting, within, for instance, rock work, or in the sails of ships, or in the architecture of buildings, etc. Or they could employ something similar to this, where they use a particular motif within the painting to show it's actually their work. And a good example of this is the artist Johann Georg Heinsch, who used obelisk, road signs, and architectural features in his harbour and landscape scenes to identify the work as his. In other instances, initials were hidden and disguised in ship masks and rock work. Now, I just wanted to give you one example of how Meissen artists, who were, of course, forbidden to sign any of their work, on occasion hid their initials, their names, in the art that they actually created. Now, this is an example of, well, it's a detail from a Meissen jug from around 1730. And if you look very closely in the rigging right at the top in orange, you can see that the artist has actually signed his work with his initials JGH, standing, of course, for Johann Georg Heinsch. Now, related to the topic I've just spoken about are the different vessels that were created by Meissen for different purposes. We've just seen an example of a cream jug, for instance, but the same form without the spout was also used, but for a different purpose. What we can see here in front of us is a broth pot. You can see it's decorated with the same cafferati scenes, but the purpose was different. This was something that was created for private use. So this was a soup or a broth pot that would be taken away to be used in your bedroom, for instance. But the only real difference is that it doesn't have a spout. In this example, we see another broth pot. You'll notice there's no spout. This is one from my own collection, and if you look on the base to the right here, you have the number 6. And those of you that are keen-eyed will notice that the previous slide, the broth pot there and the plate also had the number 6. And although these don't belong to the same service, they were gilded by the same person. And we know that because of the style of the number 6, but also the fact that that number would have been used by this particular gilder across all the work that he did for Meissen during his employment. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I encourage you to look for that for more in the future, but also for ones that I've already done on YouTube. Thank you very much.